Hi, everybody. I'm Pierre Bouvard, Chief Insights Officer here at the Audio Active Group at Cumulus Media in Westwood One. And what are the 8 things that brands get completely wrong about AM/FM radio?
When I'm asked what the biggest problem that US radio has, my answer always is the incredible misperceptions that marketers, agencies, and advertisers have about radio. Over the years, we've talked to hundreds of media agencies and marketers. We've conducted many studies with advertiser perceptions, which is the gold standard of tracking advertiser sentiment. And through all of these conversations and research, we found that there are really 8 things that marketers and agencies have completely wrong about AM/FM radios. So we have studied these perceptions and we've gone to the source of truth, the reality, courtesy of Nielsen, Maru Matchbox, Edison Research, and a number of other gold standard American consumer research companies. Why on earth are there so many misperceptions about AM/FM radio? Well, Duncan Stewart, who runs the media technology and telecommunications team at Deloitte, said that people don't think that anybody listens to the radio because there's a narrative out there that says new media kills old media. So no one really bothers to look at the evidence that doesn't follow that stereotypical narrative. So today we're going to head on, take these 8 misperceptions and show you the hard evidence that shows just why these myths are so incorrect. So we'll start with number 1, that because everyone's working at home, no one's listening to AM/FM radio. So we turn to Nielsen's nationwide study. Nationwide is the spring and fall survey that aggregates all listening from all counties, from all DMAs and metros, and rolls it up to one big national representation of total US radio listening. What we're looking at here is a comparison of spring 19 pre-pandemic to the recent spring 22 survey. And we're looking at reach retention. How many of the radio listeners that were listening to American radio back pre-pandemic are still radio listeners today? And what we find is that American radio has retained 98% of its cumulative audience from pre-pandemic. Among the all-important 25-54, it's 97%. So absolutely, just about every single American that was listening to AM/FM radio 3 years ago before the pandemic is still listening to radio today. Now, the other misperception we hear a lot, especially from marketers who are still working from home or agencies, that, hey, everyone I know is working at home. No one is commuting, and so no one's listening to radio. Well, let's take a look at the hard evidence. Over the last 3 years, Nielsen has conducted a couple studies every year examining what percent of American workers who used to commute before the pandemic are either working still from home or working away from home. So all the way to the left of your screen, at the height of lockdown, April 2020, almost half of those that used to commute were working at home. But look at how quickly that changed. By the end or the fall of 2020, a full 76% of American workers were back to commuting. And if you look at the most recent November 2022 study, this one conducted by Maru Matchbox, 87% of American workers who used to commute before the pandemic are back to work. So 87% of Americans. Now, in that little tiny blue slice, yes, there's still some of those agencies and advertisers that are still toiling at home, but they are not representative. What's representative is the big blue bar, almost 90% of American workers commuting daily and listening to AM/FM radio while they're in the car. Now, one of the other misperceptions. AM/FM radio has very low reach. This past August, Advertiser Perceptions, the gold standard of what agencies and advertisers think, conducted a 300-person study of marketers and media agencies. And they were asked a simple question. In a typical week, what percent of all Americans are reached by AM/FM radio? And their response was 44%. How well do agencies and advertisers, whose job it is to spend precious media money, understand the media habits of Americans? Well, big disconnect here. Because according to Nielsen's total audience report, AM/FM radio is America's #1 mass reach media with a weekly reach of 86%. So American marketers and media agencies don't miss this by a little, they miss it by a lot. They underestimate the reach of American AM/FM radio literally by 50%. It's not 44%, it's 86%, a major disconnect. The other commonly heard misperception is that streaming, AM/FM, Pandora, Spotify, if you take a look at the audiences, the perception is that if you combine Pandora and Spotify, that is as big as the ad-supported audience of AM/FM radio. And in fact, in the recent August 2022 advertiser perception study, they asked a very simple question. What do you think the share is of Pandora, Spotify, and AM/FM? And if you add the Pandora Spotify number together, the perception is about 44% of listening goes to those two streaming services, and then about 28% goes to AM/FM radio. That is the perception of American marketers and media agencies. And what is the reality according to Edison's share of ear? Quite different. The perception of AM/FM share of a 28 misses the mark by about a third. In actuality, 74% of all American ad-supported audio goes to AM/FM radio. But their perception that Pandora has a 16 share is overestimated by a factor of 3. They only have a 5 share of ad-supported audio time spent. And Spotify, the perception is they have a 28 share. In reality, they only have a 4 share of ad-supported audio. So a major disconnect again between perception and reality. And then if we look at the full ranker of American ad-supported audio among 18 plus, this from the most recently released Edison Q3 2022 share of ear, you can see AM/FM radio a 74 share. The number 2, distant but growing fast, podcast with a 13 share. And then very small shares, a 5 for ad-supported Pandora, a 4 ad-supported Spotify, and then a 4 share for ad-supported SiriusXM. So AM/FM radio continues to be the dominant centerpiece of American ad-supported audio. Misperception number 5. In the world of the connected car, the #1 things people do in the car is stream online radio from their smartphones. So what are the shares of ad-supported audio in the car? What are Americans listening to? Let's look at Edison, share of ear, most recent Q3 2022. AM/FM radio is the queen of the road with an astounding 89 share of ad-supported audio. So if you're an advertiser and you want to reach people in the car on the path to purchase, these are the audience shares of places you can put your advertising. So AM/FM nearly a 90 share, distant number 2 podcasts at a 5, ad-supported SiriusXM a 4, ad-supported Pandora a 2 share, and ad-supported Spotify 8.4. So AM/FM is not just the dominant centerpiece of American ad-supported audio. When it comes to the car, it is the absolute place you need to be. 90% of all ad-supported tuning minutes in the car goes to AM/FM radio. Misperception number 6, the optimal media plan. Put all your money into TV and digital. And you can certainly create a pretty good audience reach with a plan that has lots of TV and digital. So Here's the allocation, a typical well-used media buy, 68% of the money in TV, 13% in OTT connected TV, and 20% into digital. So altogether, that reaches 57% of the market, no radio. Now, watch what happens if we maintain the budget, but put 10% of the money into radio. Same budget, just share shifting about 10% of the media plan into AM/FM radio, and look what happens. The reach soars 57% to 80%, same budget, but a 41% increase in campaign reach just by putting 10% of the budget into AM/FM radio. Now, we commonly hear this, gee, I'd love to consider audio, but there's really a lack of return on investment data and sales effect evidence for AM/FM radio. Well, look no further than Nielsen, who has conducted dozens and dozens of sales effect studies where they've matched minute exposure to ads through the portable people meter and matched it to consumer packaged goods purchases or retail purchases using credit card data, all matched at the household level. And as you can see across all of these categories, radio has extraordinary return on investment, from a $3 return for a dollar spent for quick service restaurants. So $1 on radio creates incremental sales of $3 at fast food restaurants. And then you see a 12-to-1 in return on investment with home improvement, and $11.50 return for a gas retailer, mass merchandiser. I mean, across every category, radio generates extraordinary return on advertising spend. Here's another media planning misconception is, oh, radio's a drive time medium. So that's where you just put your money, just in the drive times. Well, let's look at the perception of where the audience is according to a recently conducted advertiser perception study in November of 2022. So the perception is about 27% of all radio listening is in the morning, about 23% in afternoon drive, and then about 14% midday, nights, and then weekends. So that's the perception. Let's take a look at the Nielsen reality. And what's fascinating is how strong midday is versus the perception. So the perception is only about 14% of total American radio listening occurs midday. The reality is it's 20%. The other big miss is weekends. The perception is that only 14% of total radio listening occurs on the weekends. In reality, it's 20%. So interestingly, there's as much listening in the 2-day weekend time period as there is in morning drive or midday or afternoon, which are 5-day day parts. So spreading your buy out across to include generous portions of weekends and generous portions of midday will create a much better media plan. Now, here's a bonus misperception. No one under 35 listens to AM/FM radio anymore. There's a Berlin Wall at the age of 35 and under, nobody listens. Well, again, we turn to the source of truth, Nielsen, from the spring 2022 nationwide study. We're looking at total American radio listeners by demographic. And guess what? Actually, 1834 has the largest number of radio listeners of any demographic, 59 million people. More than 35-49, more than 50 to 64. So there are tons and tons of radio listeners, 1834, and in fact, it's radio's #1 demographic in terms of reach. So we've taken you through 8 and the bonus misperceptions. You can download this deck right from the Westwood One site, and I think you can see there are pretty seismic misperceptions. A lot of this is nobody's really bothered to look at the facts, and hopefully today's review shows you that radio has extraordinary strength, and a lot of the commonly held wisdom is actually pretty far from the truth. The Audio Active Group here at Cumulus Media and Westwood One is a full-service advisory for national marketers, offering media planning recommendations, creative best practices, and measurement of campaigns showing sales effect, brand effect, and site and search attribution. Each and every week, we publish a new audio case study and insight. You can find it on our blog, and you can get to that via cumulusmedia.com or westwood1.com and look for the blog link. And when you're there, you can sign up to get a free weekly email with our audio case study that comes out every week. Thanks so much for the opportunity to review the 8 things that marketers and brands get totally wrong about American AM/FM radio. Thanks so much.